Hey there, and welcome to Comedians on Technology, People and Drugs. I'm your host, Sam Joseph, and today we're very lucky to have comedian Gareth Beavis with us. Hey, Gareth, it's really great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for sharing your time.
No, thank you so much for having me. This is genuine in honor.
But we can honour each other. You're a very funny person, and I know that our audience, the one member, John, we've been talking about a lot recently. There's only John listening. Thanks, John, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. John is absolutely desperate to know more about your comedy origin story. Was it that you're sort of a half human, half comedian hybrid, and you grew up in a sort of a race of humans, but your comedian side kept on coming through, and eventually you got on a starship and went off to explore brave new worlds or something? How did it all start?
No, exactly like that. Yeah,
Wow.
word for word. It was really difficult. I was being a normal human, and then one day, just for the first time, opened a Netflix special of comedy, and
Oh,
suddenly, just all these jokes just started pouring out of me, and everyone around me was in stitches. I didn't know what it was, and I was very scared, and I had to, go on a lot of pilgrimages to understand truly what I was, and then only when I, went to New York and spent enough time in dingy basements did I realize, oh, I'm just a comedian,
okay.
and
There you go.
that's where I am now.
Wow,
All of
amazing.
that feels terrible. So the first thing I was going to say was, I'm not a comedian. No, of course not.
Oh
And then
no,
I've just gone the other way. So well done me.
I mean, I think all of us, comedian or otherwise. I mean, to be human is to be conflicted. Um, yeah. Have you really been to New York?
I have been to New York. I haven't done any gigs, but I did go to Las Vegas
Oh,
the first 2 weeks of this year and did two open mics there, and it was
oh,
very strange.
oh, wow. Yes. Oh, we'll hear all about that. But I mean, before we come to that, can we? I was saying, I usually say before the podcast starts is like, we've got these questions. They're all, none of them really matter. It's all about having a fun conversation. But I am really interested to know about how you first started getting up in front of people. What happened?
So this was really interesting because obviously you asked me the question beforehand, and I'd forgotten how I started. So I knew,
Oh,
obviously, I knew myself. So I started this version last November 2024, so a year and a bit ago.
mm,
Did a comedy course like many people, the one at the Bill Murray, which was excellent. Did a week's intensive course, genuinely transformational,
mm.
and that's what started me. But actually, I can't remember how many, but I reckon about very similar to you, I think, Sam. Like I did about 9 or 10 gigs when I was 22,
Oh,
21,
right.
22. So I'm 42 now, and that was 20 years ago. But actually, it started because I studied drama at university, or drama and English literature,
Oh, yeah.
and I wasn't a very good actor, but
Oh.
I didn't mind getting up in front of people.
Mm.
And one of my friends at the time, just said, "Oh, we're filming a pilot for a kind of a panel show
Oh, yeah.
in the drama studio," and they said, "Oh, can you come down and do some stand up? You might enjoy that." I haven't done it. I was like, "Yeah, fine," and just
Mm.
went down and did it. And thinking back to it, I was like, it was 50% ripped off jokes and 50% what I thought was a very funny poem, which in hindsight was just very strange.
Mm.
Although I would like to see if it had legs nowadays, but I don't know if I could bring myself to. But and I think that's what kicked it off. And then I went into I started being a journalist, and I missed being on stage so much. I
Oh.
missed having people look at me, and that's really all it is, isn't it? And I signed up for, I can't remember how, it was Facebook back then.
Mm.
I signed up for the Lion's Den.
Oh, yeah.
Comedy, which used to be in the Star of King's basement, which is now G&B has that for
Mm.
some of its gigs. And I did, I think, probably like 6, 7, 8 gong shows there.
Oh, yeah.
And the, and yeah, what would happen was every Tuesday, it must have been a Friday, it must have been, even though it seems weird now to think they would have gigs on a Friday, but I think it was every Friday.
Mm.
And I'd sign up for ones I did, and then every Tuesday I was like, I haven't written any jokes. What am I doing? This is really hard, and I'd be really stressed out. I don't know why. At no point did I think just do the same material, but
Mm.
um, I would, yeah, do something, and every time it was rubbish, and yeah, and then eventually after I think sort of, well, I'll tell you what, I got to about my eighth gig there, and the because the Gong Show worked, it was six cards. If four of them went up, you're out,
Mm.
and if you got through, you got to a clap off, and I had. One week, I managed to get about 8 or 9 of my friends down, three of whom got cards. So I was like, right, well, as long as they don't screw me over, I'm through to the clap off. And if I get, then I got there, and luckily had the most people to get me through. So I won the night, and then I got to headline, and when I won the night, I was like, right, I'm gonna work really hard for the next 3 weeks, and I'm gonna write lots of good jokes. I'm gonna really practice them, and then when I do my headliner, because that's what you got, then I'll just stop. And I did it, and it worked really well, and I felt like brilliant. This is good, and that was it. I gave up because I was like, I'm not
Wow.
trying hard enough. If you're not going to try hard at something, stop doing it.
Mm.
Um, and I just for 20 years the bug just stayed there, and then
Oh,
I was waiting. I left the job and I was starting a new one. I had 6 weeks off, and the first week was a come do this comedy course, and I was like, well, I haven't got a choice now, and that was it. And it's been wonderful since then.
wow. Wow. Amazing story. And just to get this straight in my head, right? So yeah, at 22, yeah. I mean, this is people have heard about on the podcast before. You know, I also had a little dabble at that time. Sounds like you got a lot further. You want to clap off headliner. It sounds like you got a lot further than I did.
I cheated a clap off. Let's be very clear. I
Well,
cheated a clap off.
sure, sure. I didn't even have the wits to cheat myself into the right. Anyway, but right, and then so it was there. I mean, like you say, you'd done drama. You'd been. I mean, that first time with the stand up, someone had sort of you mentioned it in relation to a pilot, and you'd oh yes, we'll give that a go, and you sort of enjoyed that, and then there was this big break, like you said, like life happened. I'm interested, I guess, in two things. Is one, that very first gig at 22, how you felt, and two, like you mentioned, like this thing that happened at like 41 or last year, doing the comedy course. You had 6 weeks off. Did somebody suggest that? I'm not clear why you went back to the comedy course or how you heard about it.
Well, there was two things. The first gig, I can't really remember. It went okay, but it was basically in a drama hall with I'd
Mm,
say probably six people in there. A short two of whom weren't really paying attention because they were trying to film. And when I say film, it was like they had a video camera and they had two guys from the course who were like, we're going to do some
right.
presenting, and yeah, so it was very low, but I enjoyed it. I remember that, and enough
Yeah.
for me to go. The main thing was I just missed being on stage. That's all it was. Like I just the
Right.
kind of the thrill of getting up and then just finding that I believe that 50%. And I think that is part of the thing with comedy. I think most
Yeah.
people, honestly, I mean, I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I genuinely think if everybody was somehow forced to go and try stand-up comedy, the majority of people would feel like their life had improved because there is
Mm,
something so magical about having to push across that threshold, go out there, realize you're not going to completely fall apart.
mm,
And coming out the other side is incredible. And so, and I've always had that. And again, it is 100% for attention's sake to just want to get up in front of people. And so, therefore, that 50% was covered, and the rest of it was just like, can I be funny? And that was no, is the answer at the start. I remember one of the things I learned so early on was there was one week where I put on sunglasses because I was nervous. I thought this will be like a barrier and it will help
right.
me feel like more relaxed. I remember when I was much younger and I was doing drama, I did a character that wore sunglasses. Like this is like this is like cheat code because I don't feel any worry at all. I can act really easily now because no one can see my face. Obviously they can, but
Mm,
and
mm,
I did it and I lost all connection with the audience. I bombed
right.
so hard
Yeah.
because no one can see your eyes and you realize there's no connection there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I did those and they left enough of a mark. I tell you what it was that night I won the clap off. Sarah Pascoe
Oh.
came third in the same thing,
Wow.
and at the same like people like Joel Dommett were doing the scene. And just to be very clear, in no way am I saying that I was more talented. I very much cheated that. She was
Right.
doing like some great, clever musical comedy.
Yes.
Um, but I obviously then saw their careers take off and go, oh, well, if only I tried. And then,
Mm,
in no way would I have done anything of the same. But just realizing that, just thinking, like, oh, it would have been fun to carry on. And then, life
mm,
got in the way. And then eventually, my wife has always been really, really supportive of things I wanted to do. And she knew that I'd always had a hankering for it. And
mm.
she was just saying, hey, well, just go and do it then if you wanted to go and do it. I was like, okay, fine. But the hardest thing is, as you get older, it's really hard to admit that you want to do this. Like when I was 22, it was really easy to be saying like, yeah, I'm standing up. It's fine. It's like very much bravado. But
Right.
at 40, 41, it was much harder to go, I think I could be funny. It just felt like a real flex that I didn't know if I wanted to make. And so jumping over that hurdle was quite tricky.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, and fascinating. I mean, lots of points to touch on. One, you were talking about how everybody, could get a lot out of stand up, and I think I agree with you. Yes, in principle. I mean, I think people who do cross that threshold. I mean, it's a bit like jumping out of a plane, or You know,
Yeah.
I think at the same time, I think there are some people who actually it would just be very difficult to kind of pass the threshold, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. And even it's an interesting question. I mean, my partner is very, very shy and self-conscious. I think she could be a very funny stand-up, but I think she's never going to try it.
Yeah.
And she, I think if you could, I don't know. I mean, that's where comedy courses are potentially quite useful. But I think if you could cajole her into doing it, I think I'm imagining her and imagining other people. There's a danger that you could end up with such a negative. I mean, that negative feeling. I mean, that's you'd like to think that everybody who did it. I think everybody who was on my comedy course and who completed the comedy course and did the showcase show felt better for it.
Yeah.
But whether for some people, just doing it would actually break certain aspects of them. And I reflect on, me doing it when I was 21, and the weird thing, maybe I haven't mentioned parts of this on the podcast before, but maybe I did, is that in the run up, I think I probably have. Anyway, is I had done a lot of acting. I'd kind of got a real acting bug, and I'd been like
Yeah.
in 14 shows when I should have been doing my masters and so on. And yeah, so I kind of I was filled with this sort of stage confidence, but then this kind of like dealing with the audience in the moment and coming up with your own material. I kind of felt sort of, humbled and broken by it the first time around, such that it then was, 30 years before I really probably tried it again. So yeah, I think it would be a wonderful world. Actually, old what's his Jimmy Carr talks about it. Like, they should probably teach stand up in schools. I think,
Yeah.
giving people opportunity to sort of do that as part of drama workshops and so on would be great. But
I think it's interesting. I think it comes a lot from the same thing as my wife. Is she's one of the funniest people. She makes me laugh the most out of
Mm.
anyone because she is so she's so wonderfully true to herself, and she gets into scrapes all the time.
Oh.
Like just by being kind and thoughtful and wanting to help people out, and there's obviously they're her stories, but there's so many of them. I was like, if you just told them on stage, just like
Mm.
this, and maybe you're right in something like the comedy showcase. If you do a course and then the end of it, the showcase is just the most warm and vibrant and ready for you kind of space. I have absolutely no doubt that she would bring the house down because she's so engaging and so warm and so kind of personable. I was like, these are all the things that I wish I had on stage, and and so it's those kind of things that you wish you could bring them out. But obviously, yeah, absolutely. There's a huge amount of soul destruction that goes along with the open mic circuit. So
Yeah.
not everyone wants that either.
No, 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 no. Indeed so, indeed so. And then you were mentioning using the sunglasses and cutting yourself from the audience. I reflect that from I think probably my third. This is from having when I restarted, having from my third to probably like something like my 20th open mic gig. I performed entirely wearing this augmented reality headset. Um, which I mean, the listeners can see photos of it on my Instagram if they scroll back far enough. But basically, it sort of sits on here like this, a bit like Geordie McForge
Yeah.
or Geordie LaForge from Star Trek. Sorry, Trekkies out there. And
If you've ever
basically,
seen Google Glass, it's a lot like that.
yeah, yeah, exactly so. And I would basically be able to have my set list appearing, hovering in space in front of me, which I thought was terribly clever. But I did that open mic gig actually in Harrow, where I'm based, which was a mixed music night, and I think I did like 20 minutes there, and but I remember one of the guys afterwards saying like, you can't make eye contact with the audience, and I was like, oh right, yeah, yeah, it's actually, that eye contact is really important. Of course, in some places, with the lights so bright, you can't see them. And then so then it was this, last year you did this comedy course at the Bill Murray. Just who was the running the course? Or did
Deck
you?
Monroe.
Deck one row, fantastic. And so you did that with like a dozen people a week, intensive,
Yeah.
fantastic. And that was kind of right. So you had some time off work. You were like support from your wife. Yeah, let's go and do it. And then to doing it again after that break, how did that feel? How did the showcase go? What was the emotions going through you as you redid it for the first time in 20 years?
Showcase went, I think, like everybody went amazingly well.
Mm.
Like it it was just yeah, it was just like the warmest, nicest. In the build up was incredibly nervous. I was pacing up and down the streets and um, thinking, oh my God, how am I gonna remember all of this? And what was
Mm.
interesting was I've struggled to kind of figure out why since then, or how to replicate it since then, was we basically the course was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Um, just do exercises, nothing more than that. Thursday afternoon, you went off and wrote 5 minutes. Friday, you performed it to to deck the tutor, and he gave you notes. Sunday was the showcase, and in
Right.
between the notes and Sunday, I changed probably about 40% of it, of
Mm.
which the majority has stuck around for the year.
Oh
And I'm
wow.
like, I wish I could just work out what happened on that Saturday that made me sort of realize a direction that because it made it so much better. Like I said,
Mm.
the notes obviously really helped and they gave me direction, but the
Mm.
choices that I made, I haven't been able to replicate it since. So there's something about that kind of intensive week of creativity and the kind of just
Right.
the immersion in it that
Yeah.
meant that it just everything just seemed obvious in front of me. That
Mm.
like, oh, do it like that. Do it. Okay, fine. And all I had was some practice in Hyde Park while my daughter was at a choir for 2 hours. I
Mm.
was went
Mm.
and just stood on the bandstand and just recorded it, and then was just back and forth. And every time someone came along, was just quietly sitting. And then when it went quiet again, I was like back in and doing it because it's quite a physical set. So there's a lot of like dancing
Yeah.
and movement
Yes. Yes.
and that,
Which I very much enjoyed the last time you were at Sunset.
so yeah, and that was wonderful. And then the first time it was great, but there was no correlation. I can barely remember the 20 years ago. You know, I said post 40 things get very fuzzy.
Mm.
All I can remember is the things that I did. I can't remember many laughs at all,
Mm.
but both because they weren't there and because the jokes are lost to the sands of time. Um, and so it felt like it felt like a completely new start.
Mm.
So you know, if people say how many gigs have you done, I would never count the first
No, no, no.
X amount because they might as well have been by somebody else.
Right, a different life, a different life. Often
Yeah.
it is strange when they talk about reincarnation, isn't there? I mean, you know, different decades can feel like completely different lifetimes, can't they? Yeah, and so right, so you had this. I mean, you know, I think that 1 week intensive, you know, that makes me think of like what people describe Edinburgh, where you know you
Mm.
have this intensity and how that can impact folks. And so you did that showcase, and it was wonderful. And then you were like, wow, whoa, what a rush. I must get out and do open mics at some frequency, or there's a little break, or how did it then go from the showcase to the next you know few months of gigging or not?
I mean, the one thing about stand up is it's been really exposing to like to yourself. So
Mm,
figure out it shows you who you are really in lots of ways.
mm, mm,
And one of the things was I know that I if you give me a thing to do, I want to know what the rules are, and I
yes.
want to follow the rules, and I want to get really good at the rules.
Ah,
That's what it is. And so people said, just get out there and get gigging. So I was like, right, okay. So I
ah,
booked my first one. It was at Big Nose Comedy at Zebranos, and it was wonderful. Like, as in, like it was much quieter. It was up the top of the at the attic, and
yeah.
it was fewer people, but there was less of an audience to give response, but equally it felt warm and it felt nice and it still was there. And then I
Mm,
did I think Comedy Virgins and then a GMB and sort of went through quite a lot of the
yeah.
people had told me which one to do. I sort of cycled through. And the first four or five, while they absolutely weren't smashers, they weren't bad. There was no bombs. I think it was my
Mm,
seventh one when I had my first true bomb.
mm,
Um, and I was like, well, this is fine. And even when it was difficult, it was just a case of, well, I know it's going to be difficult. And I was listening to as many podcasts and I was reading as many things, and everyone was saying, at the start, it's 1 in 10 if you're lucky that you do really well at. And so all these things of like, there's no. Someone did say, there's no. You don't need to worry because it's not like you're not going to die. You're not saving lives. It doesn't really matter. I was like, yeah, but if people don't laugh, it scars your soul for life. So you can say, I've got to live with the fact that I said a thing that I was like, please think I'm funny. And people were like,
yes.
you're not funny is just something that's really hard to deal with.
For some reason, yes.
So, but yes, and so the first few went okay, but it almost didn't matter because I was like, well, I knew that I have to get to, 30 to see if I liked it. And
Right.
because otherwise you couldn't give it a good go. And, these are
Hmm.
just, I can't even remember who told me that, but I just pick up these things of like, this is the rules. Okay, I'll do what I said and then we'll see what
Mm,
happens. Um, and that's been I mean it's really good to kind of give me that impetus and I somebody said you should do three at least, four if you want to get good, five if you want to get great, and I thought, well, I've got kids, I can only do two a week at most, so I
right.
make sure I maximize the two, and all that kind of stuff. So it's been good, but I've been fairly I'm nearly about to hit 100,
Mm,
and it's been fairly good rhythm.
yeah, brilliant. brilliant. Yeah, and it's interesting as you say about those rules that we pick up. Certainly, listening to all the different podcasts and all the different, everyone says, keep gigging, and then there's
Yeah.
like you say, like the frequency, and of course, work, life, kids, how many you can fit. I mean, my cheat is I do this, virtual reality comedy that allows me to do two bonus gigs a week from my own home, and that,
I wanted to ask you, I mean, how you talked about the eye contact, how does
yeah.
that, what you must feel like it's different. You must be getting it, like exercising a different muscle or like growing a different muscle rather than exercising, I guess.
It's so the interesting thing with this is unlike the Zoom gigs where it's kind of like I don't know, that's just like in flatland. The thing about the VR comedy is you're wearing a headset and the audience is around you, and you can kind of turn and look at an individual audience member. So it's
Yeah.
kind of, and I mean, I have one of these headsets that basically translates the movements of my face onto my avatar.
Which one
So
is it? Which headset?
I've got the Oculus Pro
Have you?
2, I think. Is it just yeah yeah? I get confused now. It's like is the the Quest 2, the Quest 2 that I used to have. I think it's just called the Oculus Pro. I mean, they're now. It's a bit weird what's happening in the VR world. Like there was
Hmm.
like I think Meta invested huge amounts of money in it, and then it hasn't necessarily shown that much profit. And then there's this question about which way it's going to develop or what have you. I mean, there are still somewhat thriving communities of
Yeah.
folks in there. I mean, it's a bit like if you imagine being at a gig, right, where everybody is kind of wearing a full body cartoon costume. Um, and then it's gradually looking more realistic over time. But relatively few people have the pros so that they get the facial expressions. But I very much, you know, it's weird. Everybody's kind of wearing masks. And so people will say things that they perhaps wouldn't say if they were in, like a physical comedy room where you can actually see the person and it's like clearly high definition life. It's a
Yeah.
bit like you're inside of sort of a cartoon world and you're kind of detached from, it's a bit like you're playing a video game. And so at the same time, I mean, I spend a lot of what I do with my comedy booby trap 2 nights a week is riffing with the crowd and doing crowd work and talking to them about what they're doing and this that, and the other. And I think that translates and helps into my just general like crowd work with people as an MC. I hope. I mean, it also, I mean, I was just as I was turning on the backup recording, I was seeing like my because I record myself every night for the thing. I was seeing like, I mean, I got really great laughs. I think out of this bestiality set last night, and it's kind of, like I mean, obviously, I was making jokes about. I'm in this debate with myself about, like because it's weird actually. Sorry, random tangent, but so there was a person I met on sort of like the technical circuit. So I also do I speak like technically, and I network with people who are doing programming jobs and this and that. And one of the people that I met from that side came and saw a gig. I think it was at a Nice and Spiky one Monday, and we had the usual 10 open mic comedians and like a professional person and what have you. And I remember like walking back to the station with her afterwards, and we were sort of talking about it, and I think she was quite shocked from the open mic comedy. Is like, there was a lot of discussion of pedophiles, and I by this point had got to, I was like 100 or 200 gigs or in, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of, it seemed like a very bland. Yeah, I hadn't thought the night was particularly dark, but for someone
Yeah.
coming in from outside, they were sort of a little bit shocked about the material. So you get a lot of, but I was thinking like bestiality is so sort of comically ridiculous. Is it actually safer? Well, I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I do find that I end up exploring odd areas of my psyche in in the VR that I don't otherwise. What was it? I feel like there's a connection to something that you were saying earlier about this that I have unfortunately lost. So maybe I'll come back to that. But I don't know. Did that make rough sense what I was saying about the VR
But
comedy?
because I think you gave the good example there. It's like if you did do a gig where, let's say, everyone was in a cartoon, suit, and you were in a cartoon suit, the stakes would be they wouldn't be higher or lower. They'd be different because
Yeah.
there's so much more. Because I feel like you have the problem where some audience members won't sit in the front, and the front row is
Right.
often hard to fill because people are like, oh, what if they pick on me?
Yes. Yes.
And I think if there's an element of safety around comedy, we would talk differently. But then also, I think we would lose a lot of the edge. So that's why I was curious because you are getting the performative muscle going. You are learning how to say words and elicit responses, but their responses will be different because
Yes.
the stakes are, they said they're not higher or lower. They are just alternative. And that's just fascinating because that's the kind of the thing, isn't it? It's like there's so many. in all life, obviously, there's so many cues, but comedy, there are so many different things affecting it at any given one
Mm,
point.
mm.
I feel like my mission is just to understand all of them as much as possible so that I can at least know what I'm doing at any given point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a very complex and subtle thing. I mean, I guess, no more or less complex and subtle than, for example, playing an outstanding game of football, or whatever, what other, skill you might want to happen to polish. Yeah, and I mean, what's with the VR comedy, it's there's still I still it's interesting you meant to talk about that sitting in the front row. There's still I'm often trying to get the audience to come closer. There's
Yeah,
still an extent to which they fill up the room from the back, if you know what I mean. Like I think
yeah,
everybody feels safer with a slightly wider field of view, and they tend to, whereas actually from the comedian's point of view, if you can pack people in and get them close to the front, then that's actually
yeah.
much better for the laugh experience. But people are,
Only there's only one gig I've done it, but it's when everyone was kind of scattered around the outskirts of the room. There's like two people and stools in the middle.
mm,
Um, and it was one of my early sevens, and I think I wasted a minute and a half of it just being like, right, everyone, come on, let's get in the middle because this is
yeah,
ridiculous. Like, there's no point in presenting to people in the dark over there and people in the dark over there
right,
because you're not gonna enjoy it. You have to be within arm's distance of a stranger to truly create like the wave of okay, hopefully the wave of laughter. Because
absolutely.
otherwise you're not going to connect with anybody, and it goes both ways. You're either going to enjoy it less because no one else around you is giving you emotion, or you're not going to inspire someone else to enjoy it. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
No, no, absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing is, I think it would be odd to only do VR comedy, and I try and, I mean, I've been in a pattern like for quite a while until I got ill recently of like 5 gigs a week with two VR and three in person, and I'm switching now to like just I'll drop one of the live ones in order to like just kind of give myself more chance to sleep and what have you. But it's interesting, like I'm still at the stage where a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, those two live gigs are to the majority comedian audience, which is
yeah,
another artificial thing again. And the thing about the VR is it's usually a non-comedian audience, and that they're both, not quite. I mean, I think what we all aspire to be doing, what would be lovely, would be able to, as many nights of a week as we were free and we wanted to, we'd actually be able to play to a large non-comedian audience, right? That would be, a nice in a nice room and we're happy and what have you. And it's
wouldn't that
sort
be
of
nice?
wouldn't indeed. You have to kind of sneak up on that particular, as it were, that target by doing things that are simulations of it. And
Yeah,
and I think it's often what I think I've noticed is that I think there are people who ultimately can be really, really good in front of a sizable audience of non-comedians who might not necessarily come across that good in front
yeah.
of a group of open mic comedians or what have you. So I think it's important for us to not to judge too much. But yeah, I mean, yeah, and I guess so. Yeah, I see the motivation coming. You're saying like, oh, well, this is fun. Want to get better at it. And, I mean, I guess there's also, you haven't necessarily mentioned, but when you do the gig and it goes well, there's a high that is kind of like a lovely feeling, and you want to replicate that going forward. Is that the how it works?
I This is what's being so confronting. So
Mm.
it's hard. Like I said, I like to see what the kind of the rules are, or see how things work, and try and figure it out better. But I run a lot. Like I try and run every day as much as
Mm.
possible.
Mm.
I wouldn't say I enjoy running,
Mm.
which is such a paradox. And I mean, this has been 12 years of my life that, and I, less so now because of children. But like at some points, it's been 2 or 3 marathons a year. It's been and I'm not good times or anything like that, but just the idea of like that's a focal point. That's what we're training for. Maybe
Mm.
knocking another one afterwards because someone's going to go to do so. And it became quite there's good community and all these things, and there's so many good things around it. But I couldn't tell you why. Like people say to get the runners high, never got the runners high.
Oh,
Like
really?
sometimes after gym, I'd feel like, which I do
Mm.
very rarely. I'd be on the train if I did it early in the morning. I'd be like, I feel quite good. This is what it is. But never had that with running, and
Mm.
so I couldn't work out what it was that kept me there, other than just I have a training program to follow, so I'll follow it.
Mm.
And I knew that it was, it kept me from getting too overweight. It helped me to,
Mm. Mm.
I'm sure there's benefits from being in the sunlight and all this kind of stuff. So it didn't seem
Yeah.
like a negative. But to to bring yourself to get up and 5:30 in the morning to go and do whatever many miles today because that's what it says. I couldn't work out why. And it's very similar with comedy.
Oh, really?
When it goes well, it feels good, but it also feels really almost embarrassing. If people come up and say that was really good,
Hmm.
it's sort of you feel a bit like it's quite self-conscious of
Oh, really?
yeah, but it's not. I'm not. It's not. I'm not good. It's like it's.
Oh.
I've taken a step forward where people have laughed, which is really great. But I can't listen to this. I don't want to listen to this hype too much and go like, yeah, I'm doing really well. Like this is great because
Ah.
that's when it starts to really get um, dangerous. And also, like I said earlier, like the rules or the understanding what's happening.
Hmm.
We've all been in a situation where I've done the blackout
Yeah.
and I am absolutely awful at the blackout. I've done it 3 times in a row and so you get 2 minutes, obviously, grace. And I've gone out 2 minutes 16, 2 minutes 16. And the third one, I went on 2 minutes 40, where someone, and, people have seen my set. There's a bit about Thomas the Tank.
Yeah.
The one person holding the card got up and showed me his Thomas the Tank tattoo and was like, I love this stuff. And I was like, I'm going to make it through because the third person with the card isn't there. And the judges have their own one. And they
Yeah, they
overruled
do.
me at 2 minutes 40. And I was thinking, this was worth more than 40 seconds. But whatever it was, I don't do well there.
I
And
think you've done better than I have, but yeah, go on.
I feel for you. I really do. It is because it is so exposing. I mean, I've done a few gong shows, but Up the Creek is probably the most. I did it quite. I think in like my 10th gig, I decided to
Yeah.
see what it was like, and there's more than a bomb. But I suddenly, when I was up there and the lights are really bright and you're up on stage and you've got so many people looking, you suddenly felt so exposed, and I felt so thin in terms of like what I have to offer the audience. I felt like I've got no gear
Mm.
change. It's this or nothing, and it feels very paper thin right now, and it went badly, and I was off.
Mm.
And there's people on there who have absolutely crushed it,
Yeah.
and they're really good. They're doing good jokes. Everyone's laughing, and then I've gigged with them the next week, and I've had a pretty good gig, and they've struggled. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
well, how does this work? Like, what?
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
There is something at work here, making this changing these things around, and so therefore, it's like the Rudyard Kipling poem, if like treat triumph and disaster just the same. You just have to I just try and stay level and
Right.
just try and figure out what it is that's working and what it's not because
Mm.
it's all essentially made up, isn't it? So, but there is something in that curiosity about what is it that's working and what isn't, and why is it working and why is it not, that brings you back. And also just like I say, it's validation. Like people laughing
Yeah.
means it's validation, and that's intoxicating in itself. But
Yes.
it's not particularly healthy, but wonderful at the same time.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Well, so much there. I'm absolutely fascinated. Interesting. You were saying that you feel if people come up and say, "Oh, that was good," you feel self-conscious because, and well, you mentioned if you start to believe that too much, it's dangerous, which I would agree. Although, I mean, I personally, when people come up and say to me, "Oh, that was good," I love that. I'm not saying I believe them, but I love, I like after a set. I mean, often and people say that I come across as quite confident on stage, which is great to hear.
Yes.
Often internally, I'm kind of like just generally, well, particularly, is it particularly recently? But I tend to be like, yeah, that could be better there. I'm quite like
Yeah.
as I'm on stage and it's sort of going on. I'm being quite critical of how it's going, and then. You know,
100%. Yeah.
then afterwards, I mean, usually I'll watch myself back and it will be not too bad. And that will be the kind of like, oh. And if someone before I start watching myself back, which I always do, unless like the recording fails on what they do on Wednesday, so annoying. If somebody says, "Oh, you're good," that just sort of, I get this sort of calming sort of feeling. I don't think it's going to my head, and I'm not believing them. And particularly if there's somebody who's a comedian who I might be looking to book, I'd be like, oh, they're just saying that because they will get booked. But if it's an audience member, particularly if it's somebody who has no stake in the game,
Yeah.
right, and they say that, I absolutely love it. I love hearing that. Um,
I think it's really, as I said, and I always, if I have enjoyed someone, I would try and seek them out to say so.
yeah,
Because I think that's really important. But I also try and tell them what I enjoyed. Try and
yeah,
remember
yeah,
the joke. Try and remember what it was about their performance. Just and if, especially if I can contextualize it with mine. I'm like, I've been trying to do this, and you
yeah.
did a really good example of
Oh
that.
yeah,
And it was like there was someone in it was in the Max Turner Prize recently. I was in
oh yeah.
I think it was in one of the heats or whatever, and there was Angela, someone I can't remember her last name. Sorry about that, but she was doing really silly comedy, and she was
Mm.
outwardly saying it was silly, and I was just, I love this silly comedy,
Mm.
and she got through, and it was very well deserved, and I was really pleased. but it's just the case of like, you just want to be like, yes, please, in case you have any question marks. I'm sure she doesn't, but
Yeah.
that is brilliant. That is, that kind
Mm.
of comedy made me feel really happy. And those things where people can tell you why they enjoyed it, and it's, a lot of the time I get described as an alternative or character comedian, which
Mm.
I can understand why. I wear shorts on stage.
Mhm.
For partly for just for the comedic effect, but also because there is that it's a little bit like those are my sunglasses now.
Yeah.
The outfit and the I don't think it is a persona necessarily, but the persona, the way that I act on stage is designed to be a barrier because
Mm.
there was a point where I was just sort of being myself, and the very start was very weird, I realized after watching myself back after like two or three gigs of like there are five different personas here. It's like there's this kind of weird verbose guy, and then it goes
Mm.
into this kind of like low stakes dad, and then it's this high stakes lover of Girls Aloud, and then it's a angry man about Thomas the Tank, and then back to something else. And it's basically like saying, to the audience, "Oh, I'm French. Yeah, when I lived in China." They're like, "When did you live in China?" "Oh, yeah, and my dad who lived on the moon." It's like, "What? When?" And it's just this constant like moving backwards and forwards.
Mm.
And so I started to extend out that kind of slightly weirder, slightly more kind of I don't know, sort of more intense part of me. And I made this joke once. It was at a gig where I was saying, "That's not my real voice," and it slammed. It was brilliant. And I was like, gear changed. I was like, "Oh, I've cracked this." And I did it five times again after that, and it bombed over and over again. I was like, "Oh no, why did it work?"
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm going to have to give up on the kind of the weird guy. I was like, you know what? I quite like him. I'm going to do all of it like that. And I put shorts on and I did it on stage, and that gig went great. And it's been a bit of difficult because since then I've realised this. It's because it is that slight character. It gives you that space to not feel like the pain if people don't laugh because you're like
Ah,
there's that barrier. It's those sunglasses again,
right.
and um and that has been tricky to have that to kind of realize that and go like, well, you're not really being authentic to yourself. And like some people in my course said, I don't like this as much as the way you used to
Mm.
be because it doesn't feel like I'm listening to you, but it feels a safer and also more fun sometimes
Mm.
because I'm very conscious. I'm also one of many straight white male comics on the
Uh,
circuit, and if you're not going to offer something different, then what's the point? So
well, yeah. Amen.
so therefore being like going back to being silly and sometimes being a dinosaur and you know singing Thomas the Tank and just abusing people for not understanding Humpty Dumpty, like that's way more fun than sort of talking about my day that is just I feel like everyone's got the same version of it in some way.
Yeah. 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 It's well, no. I guess the thing I want to say there is I think like and not having found my voice, I think like there is this suggestion, that I sense from reading the comedy books and the podcasts and whatever that I think once a comedian can find their voice, I think whatever you do ends up being funny. Like
Yeah.
that's
Oh yeah, 100%.
and that could be just that thing that happened to you today, and you feel the need to share it, and you're able to. I guess it's
But you have that
people.
lens, don't you? You have a
Yeah, right.
lens but through which to look at it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think I think it's partly then it's your confidence in that lens as well. Like, going back to what you're saying about the blackout and the people doing differently on different times, and then also like, the particular one joke and it works well the first time, and then the subsequent times it doesn't work, and so on. And I think there's something about, being totally free when you kind of like can drop the narrative. And like I think you mentioned earlier, it's kind of like it's all a bit of a game, a bit of a story. It's sort of, I mean, I sort of feel almost like cracking comedy is also almost like cracking enlightenment. It is kind of like if you could realize that yourself is an illusion, right? Then we
Yeah.
would be free. Like we would be free to do well at the up the creek blackout because we ultimately we wouldn't care. It would just be a game. And the fact that we kind of like, I don't know, speaking for you, that sounds sort of, well, you, at least speaking for me, as I've talked about in the podcast before, is I think my level of nervousness in those situations. I mean, you were very eloquent there describing the kinds of things that you were feeling being in that exposed in the, like the up the creek room and so on, what have you. I had no insider analysis other than it's not working here. I think it must be just down to my level of nerves. There's some
Yeah.
kind of nervousness that's preventing me from doing that, and that's believing too much in the story about what's happening. And if I could somehow drop that story, I could be both enlightened and a much better stand-up
Don't do
comic.
you feel? I mean, this is something that's kind of gone inverse. I say back then, sort of the first 10, 15 gigs, I was very nervous, and I think that and the nerves. I think this kind of been the narrative of my whole first year. I don't know if it will ever end or whether it's a
Mm,
phase. Is I'm really deep down asking, am I allowed to be here? Like, am I?
mm,
Because and everyone, especially people who have never done stand up, but everyone has that idea of like, okay, being a stand up is a brave thing to do,
mm,
and the bravery we talked about already about are you willing to get up on the stage? That's the brave thing. After that, it doesn't. It's whether you say the words that are funny in that moment to those people on that day with that weather in the ceiling height, whatever it is. Um, but the bravery is just standing up there and saying the first word,
mm.
and also maybe continuing for the whole time because if it's going badly, then there are moments where you really need the bravery to go like, I should just stop. No, keep going. They'll definitely like the bit where you sing, Thomas. Um, um, I'll tell you what, there's nothing more heartbreaking when I do the first minute and it doesn't go well. I'm like, I'm a man in my 40s in shorts and I'm about to sing the Thomas the Tank Engine theme song to people who categorically will not like it. And you're like, well, and it's not even a question of like, why am I doing this? I know why I'm doing it, but it's just a case of, well, here we go. And it doesn't go well. And you're like, well, that's that. And
Yeah.
so that does often feel that way. But it was, in the beginning bit, I was very conscious that I did what I didn't know. And it was really hard because that blackout was brilliant because I felt like it was a big room
Mm,
and the I felt like you need to unfurl. Like you need to kind of like if there was like a comedy aura, people that do well, their aura is grand and it's wide and they can
mm,
catch the laughs and they can catch the nuance and that sail is
mm,
telling them like not necessarily how to react, but how to dynamically alter in that moment of,
mm,
be more bolshy to the crowd, like
mm.
figure it on that guy. Remember that joke over there. Do a callback because people are enjoying that. And the sort of the dynamics of it. And I was very clear that I was just this tiny little sail, this really narrow thing trying to slot through a hole that was much wider, and people could feel that. And they were like, I'm not interested in this because, yeah, there was some titters. So, like, it
Yeah.
was just complete silence, but it was nowhere near the level. And so when I went out, it was fine. And then what I found since then is since the actors got much more energetic, it's got much more
Yeah.
thing. And I know the kind of my 5 minutes, um, I must have performed variants of it 60, 70 times now in some
Mm,
way.
mm.
Maybe 60 odd, but the kind of the nucleus of what I do is not really changed because especially if you've got competitions, you want to do the same stuff.
Mm.
Um, and I had one last week. I did a competition heat, and honestly, it was the best gig I've ever had. Like
Oh, great.
the I like to I love to analyze, but like have an actual analysis sheet that I try and run through to kind of give me some data points to understand
Mm,
how my comedy goes. Like I love data so much just to kind of
mm.
expose the truth of these things. And it was statistically the best. So I was like, brilliant, well done
Wow.
me. And then I performed the same one the next night at a heat, and it was in a much smaller room with a
Mm,
much smaller audience, mostly to comedians. Um, and what I felt like was the first one was, like I said, it was the best gig ever. It felt like every people got what I was doing. It landed. The first joke landed well, so that's good. It means we're off. And it's high energy and it's in the audience's faces sometimes, but not in a horrible way. And if people get it, it feels lovely. But then the second one, I felt like I couldn't go back to that point of like feeling narrow enough and like the sail to like bring it in enough. Like sort of Falcon in Marvel,
I do.
where he's flying through debris in the air, and he'll
Right,
he'll,
right.
he'll sometimes go wide and then he'll go really small and go through a tiny hole.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't have that small anymore to kind of go like get how do I present
Mm,
this energy in a much smaller room so I'm not overwhelming everybody and people are like what's this guy
mm.
doing cavorting when he's 2 feet from my face.
Right.
And figuring that part out is really difficult. I can't remember what the original question was, but I was so pleased with my Falcon analogy. So
Well, I loved it. We'll have more of those. I mean, it's also fascinating. I'm kind of I'm tempted to slide into our second question, which is about technology and how that's affecting your life and your comedy. You already mentioned that you love data.
Mm.
Yeah, and as I often say on the podcast and technology, pencil and paper, memory palace technique, latest AI model, could be anything. But really, it's all subtext to better understand how you're developing your comedy. Yeah, tell me more about this data collection. How is technology affecting what you do?
Well, I mean, I was a technology editor in chief and a journalist for 15, 16 years. So technology has been a core of my life. But yeah, for since I was 23, I joined
Mm,
a tech website back then, and then that was a huge part of my identity. So I've been deeply embedded in tech all my
mm,
life, really. I think one of the reasons that we started talking was you saw me using the Remarkable tablet at one of your gigs, the kind of the digital
right.
paper. And I think hopefully you spotted that someone like he might know about technology. And so the number one thing for tech for me is that the Remarkable tablet is basically it's just a digital screen. You've got a stylus that feels the screen and stylus feel like pencil and pen.
Mhm.
Like it's the only one I've ever used that does that. You can get like screen covers for an iPad, like paper likes, which are okay, but they kind of ruin the overall experience of an iPad. This is just a one thing. It does that. I've got the keyboard attachment, so all I can do on it is write or draw or annotate. So I can type notes out and I can type up sets, or I can just write out, jot down notes.
Oh
That's
yeah.
all it can do. So it can't distract you. It can't do anything. You can't get emails. You
Ah.
can't do the web. None of these things. But you've got the complete flexibility of storing all your notes in one place, and you can go back. And the only downside is, I'm sure many people are the same. Hopefully, I can't write anymore. Like you look what I've written. I'm like, these notes are just nonsense.
This
like
is
like I,
the handwriting is just
handwriting, yeah, it's
uh,
it's so terrible, and it's got handwriting recognition and stuff like that. But might as well not turn it on because it's useless. And so you'll see sort of like, what does that say? Like after about half an hour, you're like, oh, rom com. Oh yeah, and I was like, it's four letters, and I couldn't work that out. So that makes it slightly difficult. But having that has been a brilliant tool because it means that you've just got this perfect fusion of someone that amalgamates all your stuff. So I don't have to use my phone notes as
mm,
much. I do use that obviously, same as everyone.
yeah,
If you've got an idea, I say I use that. I mean to use that a lot more and don't.
yeah.
And but so you've got this kind of this space, and so I write. I very much still like to write out every set word for word. Go back and annotate it afterwards with different changes,
Mm,
and then from there you can point out where the laughs were, etc. I used to do that in a Google Doc, and I would highlight in sort of
mhm,
like varying levels from yellow to green about where the laughs were, so you could see visually how the laughter was flowing, and see, okay, if this slows down here, this bit doesn't land as well.
mm.
And you could and be able to sort of visually track that was really good. And but I've obviously I've moved away from that because it was so time intensive. So yeah, now
Uh,
it's a list of everything. So like how long did it take to get to the first joke and the opening and how many laughs and chuckles were there and like how low was the ceiling, how busy was the room, how many comedians
mm,
were there, and just trying to get a sense of all this data, like what is actually happening here. Because there is, like I said, there is always something going on, and my subconscious can only process half of it or
mm,
minuscule amount of it. And this goes back to that point of I want to be able to walk into a room and go, right, this is, these parameters are here. So therefore I
mm.
need to, but Adam Bloom's book's really good at saying,
Yeah.
don't ever change your comedy or change your persona for the audience that you've got, be yourself. But there are
Mm,
variations that you can bring in that are, it's the right thing to do. To the audience doesn't want you to scream if you're in a tiny room. And not
mm.
saying I would, but those kind of things,
Sure.
you have to adjust the volume of your set, almost emotionally to fit it as well. So figuring that has been really good. And the other thing is, and I was desperate to find out what you thought because I know that you're a huge proponent of AI, but I've been trying to, because I can't write jokes. Like
No.
it's really struggling. You do the 10 jokes a day.
Right.
I try and do that, but I'm writing. I feel like I'm writing jokes for someone else. So
Hmm.
these whenever I do stuff, it needs. I haven't really got a very. That's why I haven't got many jokes. Like I can't really figure
Hmm.
out how I do ones that would fit what I do on stage and
Hmm.
ones that would make me laugh. Um, and this it kind of goes back to this point of the last year of the comedy I've been doing is, or I suppose trying to be funny since day one, since I was a child, was
Hmm.
try and be funny because you want people to like you.
Right.
And the way to do that is to listen and to figure out what people think is funny, what makes them laugh, and do your own version of that. And there's just like this constant like just gathering of understanding of like, okay, that does well there, that does well there. If I do this in class here, then I might get a laugh. Those people might not, you know, think so badly of me. And I found a real tension in writing jokes of like, no, I'm just writing something that's funny, like what I think is funny. Like I've seen X person do well with that kind of beat of joke or that tone of joke, and
Mm.
like Callum McKenzie is
Mm.
someone I so hugely admire because of his cadence. Like his
Mm.
cadence is off the chart, and you know his rhythm is amazing, and it's so engaging, and it's so confident and well delivered. And it just frustrates me because I'm like, I can't. That won't work for me. So,
Mm.
you know, I've spoken about his joke writing. It's incredible. Like the way he processes things is good, but I still haven't figured out my version. And so,
Mm.
um, just trying to work out where these kind of daily rituals are that I would actually get seed material for me is good. So what I've been trying to do
Mm.
is get an AI to, and badly, is to kind of build a you know either a gem or a GPT or whatever to you know to be able to for me to be able to tell it, right, I'm going to give you this stimulus. Like I've had an idea for a premise, and I need you to ask me the questions of like you know punch it through me. So I'm researching all the training and the tutorials. And I'm like, right, here are loads of things you can do. Randomly fire them at me, and it starts to work okay. But number one, it will not fucking stop giving me jokes. It will keep. Like I say, don't write any jokes. You must not write any jokes. It's like, okay, here's a joke, and it's like, stop it. And there was one time when I was on stage, I accidentally cracked. I say accidentally, I cracked and did a joke. Like there was like a rule of three, and I changed the third one to one that ChatGPT has said, and luckily it bombed. So I was like, phew, because it was almost a reflex of like that was in my head. I was like, will it work? No, it doesn't. Good.
Okay.
Um, because I wanted to find out if like is the machine funnier than me? I was there, but so it won't stop writing jokes, and that's frustrating. But it's also unerringly positive, even though I'm in there tweaking the settings. Like, no, be mean, be unhelpful. It's like that's a really clever joke, Gareth. It's like no, it's not. It's like
Uh-huh.
it's fundamentally not. And so I've been trying to build something that will be that sparring partner
Right.
to and figure out what the prompts are to so it will go okay. Well, what's the physical side of this? Like, where's the stupid? Like, where's the you know, and like kind of like try to deconstruct what I enjoy doing on stage and getting the AI to do that for me. Because I think if I could get something that was good there that wouldn't write stuff
Yes.
because that influences you so much, that would be amazing.
Mm.
And I've had some success with it. Like it's given me, it's taken me so far. So it will do things like, you know, hey, give me 1 minute of this, give me 30 seconds, give me 20, turn it into a tweet kind of. And
Mm.
it's that someone else's exercise, but when it prompts you through that, you're like, right, this is really helpful. This is really good. Um,
Right.
but then you'll tell it what you say at the end. It's like, that's amazing. That's gonna kill tonight. And like, well, now I don't like you anymore. So
Yes. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, it's interesting because I've been like as you mentioned before, doing this, prompted by Cameron McKenzie, this 10 jokes a day. Jokes is a strong word, but I've actually I, I've found that one of the things I try and do, and I've got now like thousands of jokes, and there's kind of the process of like rating them and trying
yeah,
to work out which are the best ones and so on. And so, being an AI programmer, I'm kind of like, okay, is there some way I can do it? And so I have been doing this like side research into the rate, and then there are academics who are doing this, like using different of these new AIs to try and rate the relative funniness of these things. And I mean, it's
yeah,
early. I think it's early days. But what I found was getting it to compare jokes with these are my jokes with each other. Is it would come up with but it would be quite critical of some of my jokes, and I would find that quite disheartening. And I'd stop. And it's interesting. You was like you kind of stopped because like, oh, it's telling me this being too positive. I was sort of like stopping in frustration because it was being too negative. But that said, it would kind of like it would give me it would choose like, oh, these three, these are good ones, and it would give me. But I wouldn't necessarily believe its reasoning about why it said these three were good.
yeah,
And then I was sort of more, as I think humans often do, we focus on the negative. It was being negative about three of these jokes. Actually, I quite like that one. You fuck off,
yeah,
bloody AI telling you don't know what you're doing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the like you're saying, like having it as a system whereby it would like prompt you to do the things that like that 30 second 20 seconds tweet form and what have you. I mean, I think one of the things that often can be a struggle with trying to get the prompts in if you're just doing it like with ChatGPT is like over time it kind of loses
yeah,
coherence. And so one of the things that I built this comedy mixing desks on. There's this sort of like prompt chaining or prompt
yeah,
engineering which can get you different sorts of results. But that's a really interesting idea there. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear how you're and you're saying it's are you using the paid versions of Gemini and ChatGPT or just
Yeah,
the free ones? Yeah,
paid
you got
ones.
the
Yeah,
ChatGPT Plus and what Gemini
yeah. Because
Pro.
otherwise
Yeah,
you ran out so quickly. And
yeah, yeah.
but I
The
mean,
Pro.
the other side of it is I'm as especially as a journalist, I'm very wary. I say wary. I'm very angry at AI on one level because it is changing the way that our industry works.
Yeah,
But then it's sort of, you get into this kind of thing of like you realize that it can take away it's taking away people's jobs in a way of sort of like copywriting and that kind of stuff, and
mm,
in that way it's impinging the creative process. Like one of the things people said was like we expected to have GPT or sorry AI generally to mean we would stop doing the boring things like
washing the
laundry and
dishes.
yeah, exactly, and then we could focus on being creative. It's like no, we're going to do the creative thing first, and it's like wait, no, don't leave me with the dishes. I
No,
need
no,
to
no,
I
no.
want to I want you to
Absolutely.
help me. I want to be free to go and do the things I enjoy. That was the dream, and I feel like it's going backwards. But then you also have
Yeah,
the idea of AI is very good. AI is probabilistic, right? So it's all it's doing is if it can do something that you can do just fine, then that probably wasn't, from my perspective, for your own perspective, it wasn't worth as much as you thought it was if it could be done that way. However, we can add in our own voices and our own
yeah.
creativity and the own originality that is the thing that will actually long term feed the AI models in themselves, which is kind of a backwards thing.
Mm,
And realizing that is where it gets difficult. You're like, well, it just means you have to work hard. And I think the problem I've got with AI is not the fact that it does these things. Is I'm scared of relying of I will start if you see it can do something well and you rely on it,
yeah,
you will stop working hard. And it's in that hard work of like learning how to do things the day by day, the process that you gain so much. And AI is wonderful for people that could never do a thing. Like there's some people who hate emails and they never get
right,
their point across, and they're not going to be like, okay, one day when I'm 40, 50, I'm going to write the best email, I'll get there. They're
mm,
like, I don't care. Like, and
right.
that has just it's democratized that system so well. And it's like, brilliant.
Mm,
You've made your life better. That's perfect. But if I start to go, like, I hear people say a lot, I've done the first draft in GPT and then I've figured out the rest on top. And there are studies that show if you give like two sets of students, it was like a thing advertising, you gave them one, they gave them both the same task. One of them you showed them an example version of what it could be, and the other one was free. The first group always did something that was a version of that in some way.
right.
You could trace the lineage. The second one obviously did something far greater, and it was exciting. So no matter what happens, if you give someone the original source material, they're going to do something with it that is in their brain. It's subconsciously going to train them.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
I
think
think the same
there's
with comedy.
go
You
on.
you want to have that, don't you? You want to have something that gives that you have the free reign rather than it doing anything. But actually, some jokes are really easy in terms of format, and that's when you have to realize what I'm adding to this.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think for creativity, often if you're shown an example, your brain gets stuck
Yeah,
from that. I mean, actually, one way around that is showing multiple examples. Or, I mean, there was a wonderful study that when this was again related to advertising, where they had two different teams of students, and they had one group where they had to come up with three ideas,
yeah,
right, for this. And this was just for like a click-through banner or something. And the other group, and these are hundreds of students, each team would only come up with one idea, right?
yeah,
And they showed statistically, right, that the teams that had been forced to come up with three ideas had a higher click-through rate on their banners. It's just
yeah,
if you force yourself to think of more things, and if you can avoid sort of falling into this trap of like, oh, it has to be like this, then you can just be more creative. And so, yeah, absolutely. The last thing we want is the AIs giving us the jokes, but helping us sort of scaffold. And I mean, is this thing like you say, like there are bits of writing and there are bits of like communicating the tedious. If they can scaffold us with those things and then like
yeah.
actually leave us more energy for the creative part, then
But
fantastic.
but the line is yeah, that line has to be so disciplined because it could do like I completely
Yeah,
agree about the giving you the perspective. Like one of the things I like to do with writing at journalism is sometimes it'd be hard to like just quickly have the right headline. So I was like, give me 20 headlines on
right.
this in five different formats, and then when you read all 25, I will find the one like that's closest, but it needs that. And
Yeah.
quite honestly, if I probably put their one in, it'd probably do better some of the times because headlines are quite formulaic. But
Mm.
you at least feel like that got me there closer. And I think the
Yeah.
same with it goes back to that point of like why I want to create this prompter because it would do that. Say, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. Ah, thank you. Now I can see where I might land.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that It's interesting because we were talking to Andy Zapp the other week, and he was saying like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, GPT can write you some jokes, and why bother, writing 10 a day or what have you." But I think, I mean, and then connecting with what we were talking about with Sam Dawn Park last week is there's a muscle, right? And I think
yeah.
what I'm noticing doing these 10 jokes a day, 10 jokes a day, and again, many of them, majority of them, all of them, are not very funny, but there is a kind of like this, like there's this
Disagree.
discipline of doing that every day, every day, every day, and I feel like it's kind of it's worming its way into my subconscious so that
Mm.
kind of almost anytime anybody says anything now, almost immediately thinking about the three or four different ways in which it could be, what things could I say, like there's just this like repeatedly, and it was Carl Mackenzie talked about how it's like not set up and not premise and punchline, but expectation and subversion is that
Yeah,
anything that's said, there is the kind of like immediate or more common interpretation of it, and there are, through the nature of language and homophones and this, that, and the other, there are multiple other interpretations that you could have, and so it's yeah. I feel like if I can carry this on for the next 10 years doing it, I mean, as well as having like like 10,000 jokes that I won't know what to do with, jokes again, strong word, is just it's like it's that muscle,
yeah.
and I'll be able to do that on stage almost without thinking about it. I mean, that's sort of where I want to randomly things. Oh, I think I'm gonna have to get one of these remarkable tablets. You talked about not being able to recognize rom-com. Little tip from a football coach: like, if you write in all caps, can make it easier. I don't know if you've tried that.
That's a great idea.
Give that a try. Give it a try. It's yeah, and then you were also saying something about how like it's like to be funny you have to listen to people and see what they find funny, and then this is I knew I'd be missing. I haven't been listening to people. This is my problem. I've got to start with that. Really like actually listening to what people say and what
But
they
no, but,
find
I
funny.
think the problem with that is that you end up, and this is where I'm struggling right now, is you the whole thing is about having an authentic voice, right? Where it comes
Right.
from you, what's your perspective? And
Yeah.
you know, I, I never, I can't do it. And that's what I'm really struggling with, and that's why I'm
Oh, really?
saying, because I look, there was I years ago I was had a therapist who was said, what are your values, like values, and we struggled for like three sessions of like what are
Mm,
values, and it was a case of like things that I think. And it kept going down to like, I think that because I don't want to upset, I don't want, big people please. I don't upset people because they think that,
mm,
and I don't want to do that.
mm.
Um, and it was sort of broke it down to like, what in the, if you met your creator, would you defy them for because it was so entrenched in you? And I'm like, I don't know if I have anything. Like, if
Mm,
they're like, you
mm.
should do this, I'm like, all right, okay, I think I'll do that. And the problem is you end up with this kind of, do you ever used to watch Red Dwarf?
Oh, yeah.
Like that Legion episode where it's a lot of there's an
Hybrid
entity that
personalities made out
exists.
of the
He's made out of
yeah.
people that are around them, and that feels like that's what my comedy feels like it is in
Uh,
terms of when I'm creating it, and having to break out from that and going like things that I would find funny and I want to do no matter what, even though I know people might not enjoy them to start with, it feels impossible, and
yeah.
that's the tricky part of it. And I think that's something I said that I don't know whether it's going to be like that forever or whether this is just a phase I'm going to break out of, but being authentic. You said about those people who've just got their persona down. And I'm shocked to see that you say you don't feel like you've got yours because I feel like it is quite clear
Oh,
that,
thanks.
yeah. I don't know whether it is, people say something the same about me that, it seem confident or see that I've got what I'm doing. I think is it just because I'm a bit older and, I'm a lot of people are sort of 20s, early 30s and they're sort
Sure.
of going like, well, assume that you got your stuff together. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no idea. But, yeah, that's
We,
that. I find that quite difficult.
we all have privileged insight into our own shortcomings, pain, what have you. So
Yeah.
generally, it feels like the other people who are not broadcasting directly to us how their feelings of inadequacy, that everybody is more confident than us. But it's yeah, my brain is like overflowing with different things. I just want to say, for on the AI thing, to try and build this sparring partner, have you tried asking, say, for example, Gemini, tell it that you want a prompt to do exactly what you want for GPT-5, and
No,
ask Gemini to create a prompt that will get GPT-5 to behave in the way that you want.
no, that's good.
That I think that's maybe worth a try. Um, on it's so interesting what you're saying about like people pleasing. You're not finding what's that thing? I mean, I think I'm kind of on the cusp of finding a thing that is kind of like me in that, my show this year that I'm kind of doing some of these festivals, which to do with my experiences in Japan. And that's a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And, I have an international family and those things. And so I've kind of found something to talk about that is very specifically me. And at least in the UK, the majority of the audiences, they don't really have that much shared experience with it, but
Yeah.
everybody's sort of partly interested in it, and even if it's so that's great because sometimes it's not very funny, and they're still just interested. So fantastic. I think also with Persona, I kind of feel like when I feel like me on stage, I'm kind of always trying to be authentically me. Right, like they say this, like persona is a heightened version of yourself. There's
Yeah.
an extent to which, and this is I mean, to connect back to you were sort of talking about like the annotating, writing out word for word, which I used to do, and certainly my first 100 was doing some similar stuff. Not that everybody's in the same trajectory. I mean, you mentioned there about your subconscious maybe not being able to take in all of these things. I kind of it's partly because my main job is so analytical. I've kind of started to eschew the analysis on the comedy to say and put faith in my subconscious that if I keep gigging and I keep religiously watching it back and I keep religiously trying to write and write and write and write and what have you, that kind of ultimately, a bit like running a bicycle, right? I will just have that knack and a bit like, I mean, you could approach bicycle riding like, right, you'll ride all these different surfaces and you could have a sort of data analysis like, okay, the wind was this thing and all, and I wonder if, I mean, I don't want you to stop you doing your because that analysis sounds amazing. And then I hear lots of people who have like, their all the different jokes in spreadsheets or in Notion
Yeah.
databases and all and what have you. Just where I am in the bit of my journey at the moment, I'm kind of like trying to like throw myself into the void of my subconscious and say, subconscious, you do it.
Yeah.
Because partly because I want to crack this nervousness thing in some of the higher stakes gigs where I can just be whoever that person is that I am on stage. It's
But
yeah,
don't you think? I agree with you completely. But the question then is, why are you riding the bicycle? Like, if you want to ride because you want to
right.
be the fastest, or you want to be the best, or if you're just riding just to get somewhere, then yeah, you're absolutely right. But if it means something, that phrase of like, you know, don't analyze the joke too much in the same way, like
Right.
dissect the frog, you'll
Yeah.
end up destroying. I'm like, but what if you could build a cyber frog? That
Yeah.
you could pull the
Which
pieces back
I'm
together and you're like, leave the frog's brain intact. That's fine. But the rest of it is this really good frog because I pulled it to pieces. And like I said, in some way, the subconscious is augmented by throwing all these data points or analysis in there.
oh
I'm
yeah.
not saying like break it down to its constituent points, but just at least try and understand what is happening, not how it happened. I suppose that's the thing.
Yeah, no, well, that sounds great. And I think when we look at books of like particularly like Adam Bloom and what have you, I think
Yeah.
all people are doing all sorts of different analyses. And I think, like Stuart Goldsmith's Comedian Come In podcast, and he clearly goes through and certainly very much at the beginning, he's really trying to understand how it all works. And I think, yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And the Cyber Frog, because I'm building this thing called Comedy Breeder, which is like a sort of a rated joke database of my own jokes and other people's jokes, that are in the public domain. And I do feel like I want to scientifically understand because my training as a scientist. I want to scientifically
Yeah.
understand all of those elements of joke creation. But it just so happens that the particular point that I'm at, that I've switched away from analyzing the performance part of it to kind
Yeah.
of just focusing on the individual jokes. But I'm with resources, and if there's any high net worth people out there with billions of pounds, I would love all of your money. And you ask why I do. I mean, I think it's almost embarrassing. It's embarrassing to say I don't know because I'm such an egotist. I'm doing it because I would love to just be the most amazing comic in the world. I mean, not that like it's not like I'm a megalomaniac or whatever, but just the idea. I think I always had this since I was a child, and I sort of imagined being Jesus, and I sort of imagined like just like thousands and thousands of people around me, kind of like hanging on my every word. Just seemed really, really, really appealing, and it's but to make it bring out to you because obviously you're the guest on the podcast. I'm just thinking about how what is really interesting to me is about your story and about where you're up to and like the fact that you've got small kids and you're 42 and you've been in tech journalism. And I wonder, as an experiment at some point, you could start talking about your experiences of you on stage and like what it means to what are the things that you are struggling with moment to moment, or even that the stuff that you've been talking out there about the people pleasing. I mentioned it partly because John Sharp, who's well known on the circuit, and maybe one day we'll get him on the podcast, is and he's
Hmm.
he's got he's a bit of a Marmite character. One time we had him come to a gig and he talked about some of his back, like things that happened to him in his life. And he's more of a one-liner, sort of like,
Yeah,
action, sort of pratfall kind of comic.
yeah,
And I was fascinated about that, what was going on with him and the journey that had led him to where he was as a person. And so, I think if looking from the outside, and I would say, oh, well, that's, Gareth's got this amazing movement and performance ability and just, lovely, funny sensibilities. I'd love to be hearing about, the struggles that you're having with, like your kids are like in the, like, what's the word, like six, seven, eight, nine, 10, kind of that
yeah.
sort of
Four and 11. Yeah,
there. And so, or even having two kids that are separated by that age. And anyway, I just think that I would be really excited to hear more about those
yeah.
things from you on stage.
The only downside is you're performing mostly to people, either singles or people who haven't got children, most nights of the week, and they're like, "Who's got kids?" Nope. And okay.
I agree, and it's not relatable in that way, but I think it's for example, like with Andy's app, and like none of us else on the circuit are 77, but he's facing the challenges of being a 77-year-old man, and I think
Yeah,
everybody can understand. Everybody understands what it means to be a kid, to be a senior citizen, and so on. And I think if you're going in it from a sort of crowd work angle to say, oh hey, isn't it terrible when your 4-year-old throws up on you, folks? I mean, it's not going to work. Whereas I
yeah,
think if I think you could do it where you're coming at it from the goddamn, this is, I mean, that was someone I heard recently. They were saying like, oh yeah, I'm out here, I've got two kids, like, way, like, but this is me time, and they're leaning into kind of like what it means for them to have escaped from their children and that they've like left them trapped in a cellar or that kind of stuff. Anyway,
yeah.
all just it's all ideas. Let's move on before like draw a line under my ridiculous pontificating and megalomania and ask are there who are the people who've had the biggest impact on your life and comedy, and that could be other famous comedians, it could be people on the circuit, it could be people in your family and friends and what have you. Sometimes we've already mentioned those in the comedy origin story, but is there anyone you wanted to shout out as having had a really big impact on you?
I really struggle with this question because uh, I did. I didn't grow up in a very funny house. That's not true at all. It was lovely and everything, but I wouldn't say comedy day to day was a part and parcel of everything. Like we laughed and we joked, but I wouldn't say my mum or my dad were particular at that. My granddad was always, he was the funny one. He enjoyed very silly jokes. Morecambe and Wise, Tommy Cooper, that kind of level was held up as a standard of good quality humor. I know it is. It's brilliant. The mechanics of it are fundamentally awesome. But and it goes back to that point earlier I said about who has the biggest impact. Literally everybody, because
Mm.
everybody who has like laughed at anything that someone else or anything like that, that's had the biggest impact. And it's all like these little piecemeal things. And what I do find interesting is a lot of comedians on the circuit, they'll talk about different people they enjoy. Oh, did you see that? Did you see them do this? And blah blah. And I've never really like I wouldn't say I often sat down and looked forward to watching like a stand-up special on Netflix. Like I've watched them, and I find that I think Sean Locke was incredible. Like
Mm.
his ability to bridge surreality is something I aspire to. But partly because I hear people say how brilliant it was, and I'm like, if they think that's brilliant, I should do more of that. It engages with what I do.
Mm.
But he was
Mm.
brilliant. But I've realised I watched I think three of his stand-ups recently. I didn't laugh once. Like I
Oh,
didn't
really?
laugh out loud, but I smiled and I enjoyed it, and I would
Yeah.
happily watch the next one. But I didn't laugh. And then I watch
Mm.
Tommy Cooper, and it's just his silliness, and I'll bark with laughter in the kitchen, like just
Mm.
watching that, and it's just, and I'm like, and I haven't figured out what that means because I don't do that kind of humor, but
Mm.
I enjoy it the most. I'm like trying to figure that part out, but um, equally, I think the other thing is, and it sounds really sentimental, but the people on the circuit right now, and there's too many to list, who are just doing things that you just watch them and you see them sort of land really well. So there's Nicky G is one that I see at the moment. His
Mm.
ability to kind of move the audience left and right with where he wants to go.
Mm.
And so because it sort of automatically creates that tension. Like you're going over here, you think you're over here, no, you're over here. Like you think you're over here, no, back over here. And
Mm.
then the third
Mm.
time they move, you're like, bam, then you hit them in the middle. It's that kind of
Yeah,
back
yeah.
and forth. And that kind of style is brilliant. But yeah, there's so many people out there who they said you could just watch them work and grow and get better, and that's the
Mm.
inspiration that that I really take from, I think. But and it goes back to being sentimental again. But my wife, without it, you have two children, you have a life to kind of get through, and 100 miles an hour all the time. To be able to make the space for me to go and
Mm,
sit in basements and talk to people Tuesdays and Thursdays or whenever else, and then not get annoyed. I'm like, I have booked a gig on a Monday, even though we've
right.
got choir that night, and you've got to go and take the girls. I'm like, could you do it? And she does it with such good grace because she's so
Amazing.
supportive. Without that, you don't have a chance. So
Oh wow, that's amazing. Wonderful shout outs. And yeah, because we must get Nikki on the podcast. Yeah, good
yeah.
stuff. Brilliant. Our fourth question, drugs, which, as I am always at pains to point out, doesn't necessarily mean illegal drugs. Could be, like green tea or, vodka or, ADHD medication, substances of any kind that might affect your perception of reality or just things that you crave. What's your relationship with substances? Is your body a temple? How does it work?
It's so not a temple, but I don't put anything in it that it's someone who did have it like that. I think it would be pretty similar. I've never taken drugs. Again, it goes
Mm.
back to being the good little rules boy. Drugs are bad.
Okay.
Like don't touch them. I
Mm.
smoke one cigarette to make a point of. You say you can't say you don't like it. You haven't tried it. Well, I've tried it now. I don't like it. But smoking is also it's taken a lot of my family, so I'm very much
Oh,
against it.
really? Yeah.
But so I didn't really, and alcohol and caffeine last year, like I said, I just started about a month and a half in, and I had an episode of like heart palpitations that I went to
Oh,
hospital about,
really?
and it was really worrying because like, am I dying? Like the heart was like just not
Oh.
beating properly for a
Mm.
couple of instances. I was like, this doesn't feel like it's a good thing.
Mm.
And they were initially like mildly worried, and then they sent me for tests, and in that kind of I had to wait 2 weeks for them. I was like, am I going to die? Like,
Oh, God.
because no one has been able to tell me what happened. And I was like, it turned out it was fine. Obviously, heart palpitations happen, but in that period,
Mm.
so I was like, even though I've gone from, I only drink a couple of pints maybe twice a week now
Yeah.
with comedy, it was up from like, I barely drank anything. So I thought, oh,
Yeah.
maybe that's it. And, I didn't drink a lot of caffeine. It was tea and like Pepsi Max because that fits my lifestyle.
Mhm.
I'm a young go-getter that enjoys maximum taste. And so I cut them out, and it turned out it's quite easy. There's no alcohol beer everywhere now. It's
Yep.
caffeine-free versions of everything.
Yeah.
So I'm basically down to like the most dull man when it comes to like putting anything in my body. And the only kind of things in terms of like drugs and comedy is 100% the smartphone because
Mm.
especially, and I'm sure I've spoken to many people the same thing when you feel an anxiety or a kind of a worry or anything like that, you want this desire to like take you away. So you just look at your phone because this is
Mm.
engaging in a different world, and that's really helpful. But then the comedy side, I really annoyingly had to get back into social media. I cut it out because
Right.
doom scrolling is terrible, and then now I'm back in with Instagram all the
Mm.
time,
Mm.
which is mostly filled with comedians. Which I'm not sure if it's a good or a bad thing because I spend most of my time watching reels of other people
Mm.
doing good crowd work, and I'm like, is this good because it's showing me something to aspire to, or is it bad because it's creating FOMO,
Mm.
or it feels like it's a helpful thing. It's that and Formula One memes. I mean, I love a Formula One meme, brilliant.
Yeah.
But those that I really struggle to put that down, and it's the same as like going about data. Like I've got recordings of every single thing, every single gig, including one that the recording failed and the backup recording failed.
Mm.
And by absolute chance, I mentioned how frustrated I was to a comedian I didn't really know, and she said, "Oh, by accident, I recorded the whole thing audio." I was like, "What are the chances of meeting somebody who's done that?" And then she sent it all, and so I had that again. But
Great.
and yeah, the phones are probably the biggest issue I would say, and it's a shame that so much is done through social media, but I get why.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, no. Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the social media. I like had also given it up and then came back in for comedy. And what I find now, and I hear I've got a lot of other comedians connected to me. I try and stick exclusively to the messaging. Um, in Facebook, it's relatively easy because I've got a separate messenger app.
Yeah.
In Instagram, less easy. Although I'm finding it's in some ways I am kind of really interested in how everybody else is doing. I mean, I love speaking to other comedians on the podcast. At the same time, sort of in a random moment, just seeing. Yeah, I find it too. But people are sharing great things that are happening to them, but my reaction, like in the moment, is, "Oh gosh, I'm not doing enough." It
Yeah,
makes me feel inadequate,
yeah,
and yeah. So I try and cut that out as much as possible. But it is the modern drug, as exactly as you say, the smartphone. Anytime you've got a little worry and anxiety, check out the phone. Instant bliss. Well, not quite, but
yeah. For a second, it's really there. And
mm,
I haven't even gone down the route of posting many of my gigs. Like I've never done any reels from a
mm,
show because I'm like, who's gonna? I mean, it's not who's gonna care, but I don't feel like it's. I feel confident enough yet. But I think as soon as that happens, that's going to be the next level of. You've talked about it before. The desperation to go like, who liked it? Why have they liked it? When have they liked it? What's the kind
yeah,
of thing that's given? And it's going to add a whole new dimension to it. But also important for promoters to see that you're out there actively. You're going to be a valuable person to have on, and you've got a following. And I appreciate the game, but it's and I 100% will do it, and I will sacrifice mental health for it. But just got to
yes.
get good enough to do it first.
Well, I think the getting good is the critical thing, is the honing the craft. Um, I think it sounds like that you like, we love watching ourselves back, which I think is, that's a step up from a lot of people who are just like, oh, I desperately don't want to look at it, or what have you. Yeah, I hope there's a way to do it without sacrificing mental health. I mean, I was in a bit of a rhythm last year, posting stuff on TikTok, on positive and negative comments, and just but the sort of rhythm, and I've kind of sort of fallen off that
Yeah.
now, and I'm in sort of like an occasional post. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, it's the digital substances that are the trick these days. But so, it's been a fantastic conversation, and I'm taking up so much of your valuable time, away from your kids and family. Um, let's wrap up with the simplest of all questions. Really, is what does it all mean? This life, this universe, is everything. What does it mean to you? What is it like? What makes you get up in the morning? Like, what gives you life meaning? And or are you, a closet religious person who believes it's all, for the power of Jesus or Buddha, or a donkey? Who knows? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's the kind of question you dread almost. I think there's so many different perspectives on what does it all mean, and I think often you've talked a lot about the fact that for some people it's a privilege to even ask that question of like
Yeah.
questioning. Some people the get up is thrust upon them, and it's there. And you can look at lots of things like, is it being a parent? Is it because you've got to make sure other beings survive and are happy and
Mm.
they're thriving? And that in itself is, I really struggle with the idea that there is no right way to parent. As in, if you could, if you could survey all of the billions of parents out there and just say like, I've given them shreddies for breakfast this morning. What's the consensus? There's nothing. Someone would say like, I cannot believe you're giving them that processed sugary shit. What are you doing to them? And then someone else is going like, okay, well, I'm not going to give them shreddies. And like, what do you do? How are you letting them live their life by not letting them choose a cereal in the morning? You have to give them choice. And if you can't, if there's no right answer, how am I supposed to do this?
Mm.
And
Mm.
I find that struggle a struggle. Um,
Mm.
I mean, I don't mean to sound too like grandiose about it, but comedy has really made me question like, what does it all mean? Like by
Oh yeah.
the sense of why am I doing this, but also why am I doing this? Like, what am I trying to get out of this? And that sense of like wanting to be on stage, wanting to see people, wanting to do this kind
Yeah.
of thing. I really there's a conversation you had, I think it was Hannah Lloyd Davies, where
Yeah.
you talked about this idea of breaking everything down to quarks of what does it all mean? And that I found that really interesting because I cannot believe that there's not some kind of you look at eyelids, for example, like why do they let
Mm.
light through? Probably because it means that if something bad happens, it will wake you up. Like
Mm.
if something comes along. But and the theory of evolution is that these things have happened by chance. I'm like, to have tested that and like had 15 different variants and like decided that this eyelid depth is the right one. It feels like it can't be purely by chance. Or if it is, something else is happening. And when you said about the idea of like at a subatomic level, everything is connected in some way, then that
Yeah.
would necessarily lead to something else. So I've been very much agnostic on what's happening out there. Um, but and it's the same as running. I don't know why I get up every day. I don't know why I get up and do comedy. And there's that in itself is quite interesting. And
Mm.
trying to figure out what it is to make people happy and to feel like there's everything. Life is a constant struggle for a good reason. Because if it was all contentment, then it wouldn't feel as you wouldn't have the highs and the lows. Like if it was just one note, then there's no music.
Right.
All these kind of different things. It's a difficult question to answer. But I do feel like eventually there will be a one. And you've just got I certainly think I seem to be running. I seem to be doing this comedy thing without a good reason. So I'm just going to follow that and see
Hmm.
why. Hopefully, eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that reminds me of some conversations I've been having with my kids are a bit older, 20, 17 and 17. And I think that they're having different questions in their minds about which direction to go with their lives and so on. One of the things that I think I worked out for myself on and the advice that I give is like, I think if you're not sure which direction to go in a direction
Yeah.
and see what you find. Yeah, I hate to think that it's a question that people dread. And for me, it's sort of it's an exciting. If I imagine anybody asking me the question, it's like, wow, an opportunity to talk. Woof, attention, fantastic. I can say something. But of course, it is giving like an answer that's sort of satisfying and like everybody go, oh yes, then that is what it means. Obviously, that's very difficult and yeah, almost. I guess again, it's a bit like relating to the bestiality stuff. It's like once you've been exposed to so much comedy, like you started to be desensitized to. Anyway, that's but the
Don't
yeah
clip that bit specifically.
the so some things you're saying there make me. We were referring back to this conversation with Hannah Lloyd Davies, and I'm a sort of a serial like Eckhart Tolle listener who I've mentioned a few times in the podcast, and he often talks about them, there being this greater intelligence. I personally don't see evidence for it. I think it's really interesting when you talk about the evolution, like with the eye and so on. I mean, if we when we look at the timescales involved and the number of creatures and so on, it seems to me that it's like the argument for a sort of intelligent design seems kind of crazy, but I think that I think that there's kind of like this sort of middle ground, which is like
Yeah.
it is all chance, but there's like the initial setup of the universe, right? Like, why does like there's this whole like standard model of elementary particle physics, with the quarks and the muons and the Higgs boson and all this sort of stuff. Like, it's set up in a certain way. Why does it exist that way? And then on this basis, you have this like huge universal scape in which, you've got the evolution of suns and planets and so on. And then, who knows if it's just this one planet or in the now we know that there's like, literally billions of planets in the galaxy. On this one planet that we have here, we have this sort of strange, like tiny film of like organic gunk on the surface of one particular planet
Yeah.
in this solar system, in which we've had this like multi-million year evolution, this kind of like experimental petri dish of things going on. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And then it's kind of like we spend most of the time going, oh God, no, I've broken my favorite mug. God has got it in for me. Or it's just it's bizarre, like the sort of the infinite scope of the universe and time and space and so on, and
Yeah.
then what happens in our day-to-day lives and how we can then, and then even us like we're communicating over Zoom about life. What does it mean? That it's just totally bizarre. Eckhart Tolle seems to believe there is a kind of like guiding oneness behind all of it, and that's what a lot of religions point to. I mean, who knows? It's
I think the difficulty is, I think that about being sort of agnostic around it is, I don't want, partly because I don't want to settle on one thing to say it is this and have this true belief until
mhm,
I truly believe it. But also
mhm.
there are so many, I know many religious people who are truly content, and why would I be the person to try and dissuade them of that notion? And because I don't know. And like you said, intelligent design, there's people have various versions of that. There's it feels like this is that middle ground is like can't be saying like completely atheist because I'm not sure. Can't say I'm completely follow a certain religion because I'm not sure, and I've never had something happen to me to go like I am sure now. So I
Yeah.
think the true agnostic, being truly agnostic, means just listening. Go back to thing, just listening to the thing, and just trying to figure out what does it seem to make sense in the middle of it. And that's why it really resonated with me when you said this idea of the very if everything is got some level of our fingers and our computer are made of the same material, how can they talk to each other somehow on a whatever I can't comprehend, in the same way birds can see infrared, like I can't see that, and we can't see stuff from our planet that other people maybe can, and we can see that anyway. Just all those things of like until we know what we know we don't know, then just be nice.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Like anybody who seems to be absolutely sure. Well, I mean, great for you if you're happy and you're not imposing on other people. That's fantastic. But yeah, like I can't see any reason to like it could all just be a dream or a simulation or who knows what's going on really. And I think that's a sensible thing is to sort of like leave it that it may possibly be explained and make sense to us later on, but it
Yeah.
doesn't at the moment, and we should be humble in the face of it all. Even if you are like me, a complete megalomaniac who wants to be adored by the entire world and have like sort of like huge stadiums filled with people like screaming your name. Anyway, but what are you gonna do? It's been a fantastic conversation, Gareth, and I love the listen and be nice. That's watchwords. I'm going to start doing that in comedy from now on. Let's promote your stuff. I'm sure John, the one listener that we have, will be really interested to get out to your gig. I mean, he's only one of him, but he's very enthusiastic and he laughs really well, John. We really love the way you laugh. Where could John go to see you perform and to find you on the streaming interwebs?
Well, obviously Sunset Comedy. It's a great place. Try and regularly appear there.
Every Tuesday.
I'm on Instagram and the Lost Comedian. I'm not brilliant at promoting my gigs, but partly goes to the thing of like who would care? But I really need to get better because of the fact that it's promotional. But
Yeah.
I will be in the next month starting the website Lost in Comedy,
Ooh.
which is designed to do what we talked about here, which is to try and figure out the mechanics of
Mm.
like there's so the problem is especially with AI coming in, there's so many things you can do, and it's a case of could I just at the end of each gig just download all my thoughts and then turn that into maybe do it on video, turn that into a YouTube, into Instagram, into
Mm.
a podcast, blah blah blah. And could I talk to different comedians? And I'm still figuring out the version of it. I've done some things like walk and talk with the comedians and just trying to get a sense of that worked really well tonight. Why did that work?
Mm.
And and I haven't quite figured out partly because I'm also quite lazy at my heart or just time poor and
Mm.
I commit to things in my brain and then don't follow them through, which is the worst thing. But they're always coming out, and like I said, it's designed not to. Because I think there's loads of great podcasts that, like this one, that talk to
Mm.
comedians about their journey, where they've got to. I really want to find out, what are the mechanics that people are feeling, like what are their subconscious telling them.
Mm.
So there'll be more of that coming is the main thing. So Lost in Comedy, the Lost Comedian,
Mm.
of course, Instagram, and I will do better at trying to post where I'm going to be because maybe some people will want to know.
I think they all should, and John will definitely be there. We'll
Yeah.
get all of those links in the show notes so everybody can check those out. And well, thanks everyone. And remember, you can help support comedians or technology, people, and drugs by going to patreon.com/comedians on, where any level of support will help us to continue to produce this show. No one's been there. I think I'm going to give myself like a deadline of like maybe June. If nobody like even mentions that, I'm going to like remove it from my show notes and just will stop. But what you can do, to support us would be to follow our Facebook group and comment or ask questions there, or on Spotify. Please do follow us on Spotify. If you haven't followed us on Spotify, please do that now. That will help more people find the show. And if you've got several friends and they have Spotify, steal their phones and subscribe. And we look forward to being in your ears again real soon. Last word to our fantastic guest Gareth Beavis.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening.